New Busan Colony. Like it had for the past 20 years, Captain Lee Dong-woo stood on the bridge of his transport ship watching the golden light spread across the farming fields below. His ship, the New Seoul, was not a warship. It carried families and food and medical supplies between the human colonies in this quiet corner of the galaxy down on the planet's surface. Park Ji-hai walked through rows of tall grain that swayed in the gentle breeze. She was the colony administrator, but she looked more like a farmer in her simple work clothes. Her hands were dirty from checking the soil, and her face was tanned from years under this alien sun. The grain they grew here fed millions of people across 12 different star systems. The colonists of New Busan lived simple lives. They woke before dawn to tend their crops. They taught their children to read and write in small schoolhouses made of local stone. They gathered in the evenings to share meals and tell stories about the old days. On Earth, nobody carried weapons. Nobody talked about war. Nobody seemed to worry about dangers from space. In the colony workshop, old Kim Jae-sung fixed farming equipment with tools that looked ancient. His grandson Min-ho helped him by holding bolts and learning how engines worked. The boy was only 14, but he already knew how to repair the harvesting machines that kept the colony fed. Kim Jae-sung often told stories about his great-grandfather who had been a soldier, but those days seemed like ancient history now. The security force for New Busan consisted of 12 people. They carried small sidearms and drove around in light vehicles checking on the outer farms. Their leader was Sergeant Cho Hye-jin, a woman who had never fired her weapon in anger. She spent most of her time helping lost travelers and breaking up arguments between neighbors. The most exciting thing that happened in her job was when wild animals got into the grain storage. Captain Lee Dong-woo knew all these details because he visited New Busan every month. His transport ship brought new families who wanted to start fresh lives on the farming world. He also brought supplies from the industrial worlds and took grain shipments back to the hungry cities. The colonists always welcomed him with smiles and hot meals. They treated him like family even though he was just a delivery captain. What Captain Lee did not know was that hidden sensors watched his ship every time he approached. What the colonists did not know was that their simple lives were being recorded and studied by eyes that saw them as prey. The Vorthak Empire had been watching human colonies for 8 months now. Their scout ship stayed hidden behind moons and asteroids, taking pictures and counting weapons. Commander Zeth Val of the Vorthak Third Fleet sat in his command chair, reviewing the intelligence reports. The humans had spread to 47 worlds in this sector. Every single colony looked the same. Farmers, miners, researchers and their families living without proper defenses. The reports showed no military bases, no weapons factories, no signs that these people could fight back against a real army. The Vorthak were not like humans. They were born for conquest. Their bodies were covered in hard scales. Their teeth were sharp and their claws could tear through metal. They had conquered 17 different species in the past century. Each victory made them stronger and more confident. The human colonies looked like the easiest target they had ever seen, the planet. New Incheon mining engineer Kim Tae-hyun spent his days deep underground extracting rare metals. His daughter Hana went to school with 30 other children in a building that had no guards, no walls, no protection at all. The mines produced materials that were valuable across the galaxy, but the miners worked with basic equipment and lived in simple houses. Kim Tae-hyun had been a miner for 15 years. He loved his quiet life underground where the only sounds were drills and machinery. His wife had died 3 years ago in an accident, but the colony had supported him and helped him raise Hana alone. The other miners were like brothers to him. They worked together, ate together and protected each other from the dangers of mining. But none of them had ever thought about protecting themselves from dangers that might come from space. The third major human settlement in this region was New Daegu, where young researcher Dr. Song Yi-jin studied alien plant life. She worked in a laboratory that had big windows and no security systems. Her research was helping develop new medicines, but she conducted her experiments with equipment that could have been built by children. The colony had 200 scientists and their families, but not a single soldier. Dr. Song often worked late into the night studying samples under her microscope. She was trying to understand how alien plants could be used to help human medicine. Her research could save thousands of lives, but she did it in a building that anyone could walk into. The laboratory had no locks, no alarms, no defenses of any kind. The Vorthak intelligence reports painted a picture of incredible weakness. The humans had no orbital defense platforms, no hidden weapon caches, no signs of military training among the colonists. Their ships were transports and research vessels, not warships. Their settlements were built for comfort and efficiency, not defense. Commander, Seth Val could hardly believe that any species could be so unprepared for war. What the Vorthak did not see were the old communication arrays buried deep beneath each colony. What they did not detect were the genetic markers in every colonist bloodline. What they could not understand were the stories the elderly humans told their grandchildren about dragons that slept in the dark, waiting to wake up. In the files of the Vorthak High Command, these human colonies were classified as Grade 1 targets, the easiest possible conquest. The kind of victory that young Vorthak officers used to prove themselves worthy of promotion. The reports recommended immediate action before the humans could build any real defenses. Park Ji-hai finished her evening, walked through the grain fields and looked up at the stars. She had been born on Earth, but she loved this quiet world where she could watch alien constellations every night. She did not know that hostile eyes were watching her from those same stars. She did not know that her peaceful life was about to end in fire and blood. But deep beneath her feet, ancient systems waited in silence. They had been waiting for over 200 years for a signal that would wake them from their long sleep. The colonists lived their quiet lives, never knowing that they were protected by something much older and much more dangerous than any conventional army. The Vorthak prepared for what they thought would be an easy victory against helpless farmers and miners. They did not know they were about to learn why humanity had survived when so many other species had fallen to extinction. They were about to discover what humans became when someone threatened their children. The peaceful facade was perfect. It had fooled every enemy for centuries, but it was still just a facade, and soon the galaxy would see what lay beneath it. The attack began at dawn when most of the colonists were still sleeping. 3 massive Vorthak warships dropped out of hyperspace above New Busan, their hulls black against the morning sky. The ships were each the size of a city block covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. Park Ji-hai was drinking her morning coffee when the first plasma beam struck the colony center. The administrative building where she worked every day simply vanished in a ball of green fire. The explosion was so bright it hurt to look at. The shockwave knocked Park Ji-hai to the ground and shattered every window in the residential area. She could hear screaming from the direction of the school where 30 children had been getting ready for their morning lessons. Captain Lee Dong-woo was loading grain shipments onto the New Seoul when the attack started. His transport ship had no weapons, no shields, no way to fight back against warships. He watched in horror as the Vorthak vessels began systematically destroying every building in the colony. The farming equipment that had taken years to build was reduced to melting metal in seconds. The Vorthak landing ships descended like metal vultures. Each one carried 50 alien soldiers in full battle armor. The soldiers were tall, with scaled skin and glowing red eyes. Their weapons fired bolts of energy that could punch through concrete walls. They moved through the colony with practiced efficiency, killing anyone who tried to resist. Kim Jae-sung tried to protect his grandson Minho by hiding in the workshop, but the Vorthak soldiers found them anyway. The old man grabbed a welding torch and tried to fight, but the aliens laughed at his pathetic weapon. One soldier grabbed Kim Jae-sung by the throat and lifted him off the ground. The boy Minho screamed as he watched his grandfather die. The Vorthak commander was a massive alien named Korth Val, who stood 8 feet tall. His armor was decorated with the bones of his previous victims. He walked through the burning colony and selected the strongest humans to be taken as slaves. The weak and the old were shot where they stood. The young children were loaded onto transport ships for sale in the slave markets. Park Ji-hai crawled through the rubble trying to find survivors. She could hear crying from beneath a collapsed building, but when she tried to dig through the debris, a Vorthak soldier spotted her. The alien raised his weapon to kill her, but then paused. He spoke into a communication device and received orders to capture her alive. She was valuable because she knew how to run the farming operations. On New Incheon, the attack was even more brutal. Kim Tae-hyun was deep in the mines when the Vorthak ships arrived. He felt the ground shake as plasma cannons destroyed the surface buildings. When he climbed to the surface, he found his worst nightmare waiting for him. The colony was burning and alien soldiers were herding the survivors into metal cages. His daughter, Hana, was among the captured children. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, but she was alive. Kim Tae-hyun tried to run to her, but Vorthak soldiers blocked his path. One alien hit him with the butt of an energy rifle, and he collapsed to the ground. When he looked up again, the transport ship carrying his daughter was already lifting off. The mining equipment that had been his life work was being loaded onto Vorthak cargo ships. The aliens took everything of value and destroyed everything else. They planted explosives in the mine shafts and collapsed the tunnels that had taken decades to dig. The work of an entire generation was erased in a single morning. Young Minho managed to escape the massacre at New Busan by hiding in a grain silo. He watched through a crack in the wall as the Vorthak soldiers lined up the captured colonists. The aliens were sorting them like livestock, separating the useful from the useless. The useful ones would live as slaves. The useless ones would die commander. Korthval stood before the surviving colonists and spoke in broken human language. His voice was like grinding metal, and his words carried the promise of more suffering to come. He told them that the Vorthak Empire now owned these worlds and everything on them. The humans were now property of the Vorthak state. The alien commander broadcast a message to all human colonies in the sector. The message was simple and terrifying. Submit completely to Vorthak rule or face the same fate as New Busan, New Incheon, and New Daegu. The humans had 3 days to surrender or the attacks would continue. The Vorthak would not show mercy to those who resisted on New Daegu. Dr. Song Yi-jin hid in her laboratory as alien soldiers smashed her research equipment. 20 years of work was destroyed in minutes. The plant samples she had been studying were trampled under alien boots. The medicines she had been developing were lost forever. The soldiers laughed as they destroyed everything she had built, but something strange happened as the attacks continued. The elderly colonists began speaking words that made no sense to their captors. Old women whispered about dragons waking up from their sleep. Old men muttered about ancient promises that would soon be kept. The Vorthak soldiers ignored these ramblings as the desperate words of broken people. Deep beneath the colony's buried communication arrays that had been silent for centuries suddenly activated. The systems were so old that they did not appear on any modern star charts. The signals they sent traveled through subspace to destinations that officially did not exist. The messages were simple, but their meaning was clear. Human colonies were under attack. Captain Lee Dong-woo managed to escape New Busan in his transport ship, but he could not save any of the colonists. The Vorthak warships let him go because one fleeing ship would spread fear to other human settlements. He broadcast emergency signals as he fled, but he knew it was too late. For the people he had left behind, the news of the attack spread through human space like wildfire. The government on Earth issued formal protests and called for immediate peace negotiations. The Vorthak Empire responded by demanding complete surrender. Within 72 hours, they claimed that human expansion into their territory was an act of war that justified their response. But the protests and negotiations were just for show. The real response was already beginning in places the galaxy had forgotten. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, ancient systems were coming online. Buried facilities on Mars and Europa were receiving activation codes that had not been used in over 200 years. Park Ji-hai was loaded onto a Vorthak slave ship, along with 200 other colonists. She looked through the small window at her burning world and made a promise to herself. If she lived through this, she would make sure the galaxy knew what the Vorthak had done to innocent people. She did not know that her promise was about to be kept in ways she could never imagine. The Vorthak celebrated their easy victory. They had conquered 3 human worlds in a single day with minimal losses. Their young officers boasted about how weak and pathetic the humans were. They began planning attacks on more colonies, confident that the entire human species would surrender within a week. Commander Korthval filed his report to the Vorthak High Command. He recommended immediate expansion of the conquest, to include all human settlements in the sector. The humans had no real military and no way to fight back. It would be the easiest expansion in Vorthak history. But in the deepest parts of space, something ancient was stirring. The Dragon Protocols, that had been sleeping for centuries, were finally awakening. The Vorthak thought they had won an easy victory against helpless farmers and miners. They had no idea they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. The peaceful facade
was broken. The dragons were waking up, and soon the galaxy would remember why humanity had survived when so many other species had fallen.
3 days after the attacks, Admiral Yoon Soo-jin sat in her office on the naval base at Neo-Tokyo, staring at a message that should not have existed. The communication had appeared on her personal terminal using authorization codes that were older than her grandmother. The message contained only coordinates and a single word. Dragon. The coordinates pointed to a location on Earth that did not appear on any official map. Admiral Yoon had served in the human navy for 30 years. But she had never heard of any facility at those coordinates. The authorization codes were authentic, but they dated back over 2 centuries, to a time when humanity was fighting wars that history books claimed never happened. Dr. Kang Hyo-rin received a similar message at her research station orbiting Jupiter. She was a specialist in alien biology, but the message that appeared on her screen made her question everything she thought she knew about human science. The genetic markers mentioned in the message matched patterns in her own DNA that she had never understood. The message told her to report to Earth immediately using a priority transport that would be waiting at the nearest military base. When she arrived at the base, the transport pilot looked at her with strange eyes and asked if she knew what she was getting into. Dr. Kang told him she had no idea, but something deep in her mind whispered that she was about to learn secrets that would change everything. The transport ship that carried Admiral Yoon and Dr. Kang to Earth was unlike anything either woman had ever seen. It moved through space without making a sound, and its hull seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The pilot spoke very little, but when he did talk, his voice carried an accent that sounded ancient. They landed at a facility hidden beneath the Antarctic ice that stretched for miles in every direction. The entrance was guarded by automated systems that scanned their genetic codes before allowing them inside. Dr. Kang realized that the scanners were not just checking their identity, they were confirming that they carried specific bloodlines inside the facility. They found corridors that seemed to go on forever, lined with massive cylindrical chambers. Each chamber was the size of a small room and filled with a glowing blue liquid that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Admiral Yoon counted over 1,000 chambers in the first corridor alone, and there were dozens of corridors. The computer systems recognized Dr. Kang's genetic signature and granted her access to files marked with security classifications she had never heard of. The files contained information about something called the Dragon Protocol, a program that had been initiated during humanity, early expansion into space when they faced enemies that conventional weapons could not defeat. According to the files, humanity had discovered that they were not alone in the galaxy, and most of the other species were hostile. The early human colonies were being destroyed by aliens who saw humans as weak prey. The government had been forced to take desperate measures to ensure the survival of the species. The Dragon Protocol involved volunteers from the military who agreed to undergo genetic modification using DNA samples taken from the most dangerous predators humanity had encountered. The volunteers were enhanced with alien genetic material that gave them superhuman strength, speed, and durability, but the process also changed them in ways that made them no longer entirely human. Admiral Yoon read reports about the first dragon warriors and felt her blood run cold. The volunteers had been transformed into living weapons capable of fighting enemies that could destroy entire planets. The program had been so successful that it ended the early alien wars, but the cost had been enormous. The warriors could no longer live normal human lives. The first chamber began to drain as they watched, revealing a figure that had been sleeping for over 200 years. Captain Nam Jun-woo had volunteered for the Dragon Protocol in 2185 when he was 25 years old. Now his body was covered in scales that looked like armor, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that was both beautiful and terrifying. When Captain Nam opened his eyes for the first time in centuries, he looked directly at Admiral Yoon and spoke in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. He asked for a status report on the current threat, and she realized that somehow he already knew about the Vorthak attacks. The dragon warriors were connected to something that allowed them to sense when humanity was in danger. More chambers began draining throughout the facility, revealing warriors who had been sleeping and waiting for the day they would be needed again. Each warrior looked different because they had been enhanced with DNA from different alien species, but they all shared the same inhuman beauty and deadly grace. Lieutenant Park, so young, had been enhanced with genetic material from a species of spaceborne predators. Her skin had a metallic sheen, and her fingers ended in claws that could cut through battleship armor. Sergeant Lee Kyung-ho had been modified with DNA from creatures that lived in the vacuum of space and could survive without breathing. Dr. Kang watched in fascination as the warriors began moving through exercises that tested their enhanced abilities. Captain Nam lifted a piece of equipment that weighed several tons as if it were made of paper. Lieutenant Park moved so fast that she seemed to teleport from one side of the room to the other. The computer systems provided the warriors with updated information about current human technology and the nature of the Vorthak threat. They absorbed the information with minds that had been enhanced to process tactical data at superhuman speeds. Within hours, they understood everything about the current situation. Admiral Yoon realized that the dragon warriors were not just enhanced soldiers. They were humanity's answer to threats that normal humans could not face. They had been created during a time when humanity was on the edge of extinction, and they carried within them the genetic legacy of every enemy humanity had ever defeated. The awakening spread to other hidden facilities throughout human space. On Mars, beneath the ancient polar research stations, more dragon warriors emerged from their long sleep. On Europa and Titan and Hidden, bases in the asteroid belt, hundreds of enhanced humans began preparing for war. Each facility contained different types of warriors, designed for specific kinds of combat. Some were built for space warfare, others for planetary assault. Still others for infiltration and sabotage missions. The Dragon Protocol had created an entire army of enhanced humans and hidden them throughout the galaxy. Captain Nam Jun-woo stood before Admiral Yoon and Dr. Kang and explained what would happen next. The Dragon warriors would deploy to the threatened colonies in small teams that could move without being detected by enemy sensors. They would not announce their presence or demand surrender. They would simply eliminate the threat. The warriors began suiting up in armor that looked like it was grown rather than manufactured. The armor bonded with their enhanced skin and provided them with weapon systems that were integrated into their bodies. They were not carrying weapons. They had become weapons. Dr. Kang asked Captain Nam if the warriors were still human, and he looked at her with eyes that glowed like stars. He told her that they remembered what it meant to be human, and they fought to protect humanity. But they had given up their humanity to become something more dangerous than any alien threat. The transport ships that would carry the dragon warriors were hidden in the same facilities where the warriors had been sleeping. The ships were black and silent and could move through space. Without being detected, they had been waiting as long as the warriors for the day they would be needed. Admiral Yoon watched the first team of dragon warriors board their transport ship and felt a mixture of hope and terror. She understood now that humanity had never been as defenseless as they appeared. The peaceful colonies and gentle farmers were protected by guardians who slept in the darkness, waiting for someone to threaten their charges. The Vorthak Empire thought they had conquered helpless human settlements. They had no idea that their attacks had triggered an ancient protocol that would bring down upon them the wrath of creatures that were more dangerous than any nightmare. The dragons were awake, and they were coming. The black ships arrived at New Busan without warning, moving through space like shadows that had learned to fly. The Vorthak sensors detected nothing, because the dragon warrior vessels were built using technology that existed beyond normal understanding. 3 ships approached the occupied colony, each carrying a team of enhanced humans who had been sleeping for centuries. Captain Nam Jun-woo stood in the command center of his ship, watching the burning colony below. His enhanced eyes could see through the smoke and identify every Vorthak position. His modified brain processed tactical information faster than any computer, and he already knew exactly how the battle would unfold. Lieutenant Park So-young prepared her team for deployment checking, weapons that were grown from alien technology rather than manufactured. The dragon warriors did not carry guns because their bodies had been transformed into living weapons, Their claws could cut through battleship armor, and their enhanced muscles could crush steel. The first strike came from orbit as Captain Nam and two other warriors dropped from their ship without using any kind of landing craft. They fell through the atmosphere like meteors, their enhanced bodies protected by scales that could withstand re-entry heat. The Vorthak guards at the colony perimeter looked up just in time to see three figures slam into the ground, with impacts that shook the earth. Kim Tae-hyun was hiding in the ruins of the mining facility when he saw the warriors land. He watched in amazement as three beings that looked almost human but clearly were not began moving toward the Vorthak garrison. The lead warrior, Captain Nam, walked calmly through plasma fire that should have killed any normal person, but the energy beams barely left marks on his scaled skin. The Vorthak commander, Korth Val, ordered his soldiers to concentrate their fire on the approaching figures, but their weapons seemed useless against these strange enemies. The dragon warriors moved with speed that made them hard to target, and when the plasma bolts did hit them, they simply absorbed the energy and kept coming. Lieutenant Park So-young flanked around the Vorthak position, moving so fast that she seemed to teleport from cover to cover. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to dodge weapon fire while her claws extended from her fingertips like curved swords. The first Vorthak soldier she reached died before he could even scream. The battle for New Busan lasted exactly 17 minutes. Captain Nam walked through the center of the Vorthak formation, killing every alien he encountered with his bare hands. His enhanced strength allowed him to tear through their armor like paper, and his tactical mind anticipated every move they made before they made it. Sergeant Lee Kyung-ho approached the slave pens where the human colonists were being held captive. The Vorthak guards raised their weapons, but he moved faster than they could track. His claws flashed in the alien sunlight, and the guards fell without firing a shot. The prisoners watched in stunned silence as their rescuer cut through the metal bars as if they were made of soft wood. Park Ji-hae emerged from the slave pen and stared at the warrior who had freed her. Sergeant Lee looked almost human, but his skin had a metallic sheen and his eyes glowed with inner fire. She asked if he was still human, and he told her that he was what humans became when someone hurt their family. The liberation of New Incheon happened simultaneously as another team of dragon warriors struck the mining colony. Lieutenant Park So-young led 5 enhanced humans against a Vorthak garrison of 300 soldiers. The aliens had turned the colony into a fortress, but their defenses were designed to stop normal human attacks. The dragon warriors did not attack the fortress, they simply walked through it. Lieutenant Park punched through a concrete wall that was 3 feet thick, while her teammates tore apart the weapon emplacements with their bare hands. The Vorthak soldiers fired everything they had, but their plasma weapons could not penetrate the warriors' enhanced skin. Kim Tae-hyun watched from his hiding place as the dragon warriors systematically destroyed every Vorthak position in the colony. The aliens who had seemed so powerful and terrifying were being hunted like animals by creatures that moved like living nightmares. The sounds of battle echoed through the mining tunnels, but the fighting was completely one-sided. Master Sergeant Choi Dong-ho found the transport ship where the human children were being held, including Kim Tae-hyun's daughter Hana. The Vorthak guards tried to use the children as hostages, but the dragon warrior moved faster than they could react. His enhanced senses allowed him to target the aliens without harming any of the prisoners. When Hana was reunited with her father, she stared at Master Sergeant Choi with wide eyes that were full of wonder and fear. She asked if he was an angel, and he knelt down beside her. His glowing eyes were gentle despite their alien appearance. He told her that he was what happened when bad people hurt children and good people got angry. The third strike hit New Daegu, where Dr. Song Yi-jin had been forced to watch the Vorthak soldiers destroy her lifework. The dragon warriors who liberated the research colony moved through the facility like ghosts, killing every alien they found, while leaving the human prisoners completely unharmed. Commander Korth Val tried to escape when he realized that his forces were being wiped out, but Captain Nam Jun-woo was waiting for him at his ship. The Vorthak commander was 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor, but the dragon warrior lifted him off the ground with one hand. The alien who had terrorized innocent colonists died like the coward he was. The Vorthak High Command received panicked reports from their colonial forces. Entire garrisons were being destroyed by small groups of unknown enemies. The surveillance system showed humanoid figures moving with impossible speed and strength. What should have been an easy conquest had become a nightmare. Fleet Admiral Zeth Val demanded answers from his intelligence officers, but they had no explanation for what was happening. The reports described creatures that looked like humans but possessed abilities that defied all known science. Some could survive in vacuum, others could tear through battleship armor with their bare hands. The Dragon Warriors did not stop with liberating the colonies. They began hunting down every Vorthak ship in the sector. Black vessels appeared without warning throughout Vorthak space, carrying enhanced humans who boarded enemy ships, and killed everyone aboard. The aliens who had thought conquest would be easy found themselves being hunted by predators they could not understand. Lieutenant Park, so young, led a boarding action against a Vorthak cruiser that had participated in the colony attack. She and her team cut through the ship hull and moved through the corridors like a plague of death. The alien crew tried to fight, but they were facing enemies who had been designed to kill creatures far more dangerous than themselves. The psychological impact on the Vorthak forces was devastating. Their soldiers began refusing orders to engage the mysterious human warriors. Some garrisons abandoned their positions and fled, rather than face an enemy that seemed impossible to kill. The easy conquest had become a route that threatened the stability of their entire empire. Captain Nam Junwoo stood in the ruins of New Busan, surrounded by the bodies of dead aliens, and looked up at the stars where more Vorthak ships were fleeing. The system. The colonists who had been freed stared at him with mixtures of gratitude and terror. He understood their fear because he remembered what it was like to be fully human, but the Dragon Warriors were not finished with their mission. They had liberated the colonies and rescued the prisoners, but the Vorthak Empire still existed somewhere in space, planning more attacks against innocent people. The enhanced humans had been created to eliminate threats to humanity, and that threat still lived. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin received reports from all 3 liberated colonies that confirmed what she had hoped and feared. The Dragon Warriors were everything the ancient files had promised, unstoppable killers who could face any enemy and win. But they were also no longer entirely human, and she wondered what that would mean for the future. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity, peaceful appearance, had been hiding guardians who were more dangerous than any nightmare. The Vorthak had awakened something that had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for someone to threaten human children. Now the dragons were fully awake, and they were not finished hunting. The Vorthak homeworld had never seen an enemy fleet approach its borders in over 300 years. Their capital system was protected by the largest military force in their empire, with thousands of warships stationed around their home planet. The Vorthak High Command felt confident that no enemy would dare attack their stronghold. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the enemy fleet take defensive positions around the Vorthak homeworld. Her own fleet consisted of only 12 black ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Each ship carried a full company of Dragon Warriors, but that was not what would terrify the aliens. The human fleet moved through space with perfect silence, while the Vorthak scrambled to organize their defenses. Their largest battleships took positions between the human ships and their homeworld. The alien commanders expected a massive space battle with thousands of ships fighting for control of the system. Instead, Admiral Yoon broadcast a message that reached every Vorthak ship and every listening post in their empire. Her voice was calm and cold as she spoke words that would haunt the alien species forever. She told them that they had attacked human children, and now they would understand why humanity kept the dragons sleeping. Captain Nam Junwoo requested permission to demonstrate what the Dragon Warriors were capable of achieving. Admiral Yoon selected the largest Vorthak battleship in their fleet, a massive vessel that carried 5,000 alien soldiers and enough firepower to destroy entire planets. The ship was their newest and most advanced warship. The demonstration began when Captain Nam launched himself from his ship, wearing only his enhanced armor. The Vorthak watched in confusion as a single figure flew through space toward their mightiest battleship. Their weapons officers prepared to fire, but their commanders wanted to see what one being thought he could accomplish. Captain Nam landed on the hull of the battleship and began cutting through the armor plating with his bare hands. His claws extended and hardened until they could slice through metal that was designed to withstand plasma cannons. The alien crew inside felt the ship shudder as something began tearing its way through their defenses. Master Sergeant Lee Kyung-ho joined the assault, moving across the ship hull like a spider made of living metal. His enhanced body allowed him to survive in the vacuum of space, while his tactical mind identified the most critical systems to destroy. The battleship was the size of a city, but the two dragon warriors treated it like a puzzle to be solved. The Vorthak crew tried to repel the boarders, but they were facing enemies who had been designed to fight in conditions that would kill normal humans. The dragon warriors moved through the ship corridors like a plague of death, killing everyone they encountered while working their way toward the command center. Fleet Admiral Seth Val watched from his own ship as his most powerful battleship went silent. The last transmission from the vessel was a scream that cut off in the middle. The ship continued to drift through space, but no one aboard was answering communication attempts. The silence was more terrifying than any explosion. Lieutenant Park So-young led the second demonstration against a Vorthak carrier that held 200 fighter craft and 3,000 crew members. She approached the ship alone, moving through space faster than their sensors could track. When she landed on the carrier hull, she began systematically destroying every weapon system. The Vorthak fighter pilots tried to launch their ships, but Lieutenant Park had already disabled the launch systems. Her enhanced strength allowed her to tear apart machinery that required heavy equipment to repair. She moved through the carrier like a ghost that had learned to destroy everything it touched. Dr. Kang Hyo-rin monitored the demonstrations from the human flagship and watched as individual dragon warriors dismantled warships that should have required entire fleets to defeat. The enhanced humans were not just powerful. They were smart enough to target the exact systems that would cripple their enemies most effectively. The psychological impact on the Vorthak fleet was immediate and devastating. Their soldiers began abandoning their posts rather than face enemies who could survive in space and tear apart battleships with their bare hands. The admirals who had planned to defend their homeworld watched their forces crumble without firing a shot. Emperor Vorthkai himself appeared on the communication channels, offering immediate surrender and full reparations for the attacks on human colonies. His voice shook with fear as he begged for mercy from creatures he could not understand. The mighty Vorthak Empire was reduced to pleading for its survival. But Captain Nam Jun-woo had one final message for the galaxy. He broadcast on all frequencies so that every species would hear his words. He told them that humanity preferred peace, but they were very good at war. He explained that the dragon warriors had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for someone to threaten human children. The captain stood on the hull of the destroyed Vorthak battleship with space as his backdrop and stars reflecting off his scaled armor. He looked directly into the camera and spoke words that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. He said that the dragons were always watching and they would always respond to threats against humanity. Admiral Yoon accepted the Vorthak surrender, but she made it clear that any future attacks on human colonies would result in the complete destruction of the Vorthak species. The dragon warriors had shown restraint by only demonstrating their power, but next time there would be no mercy. The news of the demonstration spread through the galaxy, faster than light as species after species learned what had happened to the mighty Vorthak Empire. The aliens who had seemed so powerful and terrifying had been reduced to begging for mercy by a handful of enhanced humans. Other hostile species who had been planning attacks on human settlements quietly abandoned their plans. The dragon warriors had sent a message that echoed through every corner of the galaxy. Humanity looked peaceful and weak, but they were protected by guardians who were more dangerous than any nightmare. The human colonies were rebuilt stronger than before, with the colonists knowing that they were protected by something beyond their understanding. The children who had been rescued from Vorthak slave ships grew up with stories about the dragon warriors who had saved them from a fate worse than death. Kim Tae-hyun and his daughter Hana returned to their rebuilt home on New Incheon, but they never forgot the enhanced human who had rescued them. The mining engineer taught his daughter that sometimes good people had to become monsters to protect innocent lives. Park Ji-hye resumed her work as colony administrator on New Busan, but she kept a small shrine in her office dedicated to the dragon warriors who had freed her from slavery. She knew that somewhere in the darkness of space, the enhanced humans were sleeping again, waiting for the next threat. Dr. Song Yi-jin rebuilt her laboratory on New Daegu and continued her research into alien biology. but now she studied samples provided by the dragon warriors. Her work helped develop new medicines that would save thousands of lives across human space. The dragon warriors returned to their hidden facilities and entered their sleeping chambers, but the galaxy knew they were still there. Captain Nam Jun-woo and his enhanced soldiers had become legends that parents told their children and nightmares that hostile aliens used to frighten each other. The Vorthak Empire survived, but they became the most peaceful species in the galaxy. Their former warriors became farmers and artists who created beautiful works dedicated to the mercy they had received. The memory of the dragon warriors haunted their dreams and kept them from ever again considering violence. Young Minho grew up to become a historian who documented the story of the dragon warriors. He interviewed the survivors of the attacks and the witnesses to the demonstrations. His work ensured that future generations would remember both the cost of threatening humanity and the price of awakening the dragons. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin returned to her duties knowing that humanity was protected by guardians who slept in the darkness. She understood that the peaceful facade was not a lie, but a choice. The enhanced humans allowed normal humans to live gentle lives because they carried the burden of violence. The galaxy learned to respect the quiet human colonies and their simple farming communities. Every species understood that beneath the peaceful surface lay something ancient and deadly. The dragon warriors had shown mercy once, but everyone knew that mercy had limits in the depths of space. The black ships waited in hidden bases, while their crews slept in chambers filled with glowing liquid. The enhanced humans dreamed of the day they might be needed again, but they hoped that day would never come. They had chosen to become monsters so that humanity could remain human. The peaceful facade returned, but now it was backed by the knowledge that humanity was never truly defenseless. The colonists went back to their farms and mines and laboratories, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the dragons were watching and waiting. And across the galaxy, hostile species looked at human settlements and remembered the lesson. They had learned you could attack human colonies if you wanted to, but if you did, you would have to face the consequences of awakening the dragons.